Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
I'm Gianelloni Connor, an author of nonfiction and travel books, and I'm going to read today from my book, Savoring the Camino de Santiago. It's the pilgrimage, not the hype. Chapter 15, The Baby Carriage. Along the Camino, you see every sort of travel group: singles, pairs, couples holding hands, groups, large groups, even one very pregnant young woman. Parents with children, people walking with dogs. I always looked over the children closely. I myself found the walking very strenuous. How would a 6-year-old kid manage it? One time we met and chatted with a threesome on bikes, father, mother, and son, who was about 10 years old. I knew how James had hated biking uphill, so I was curious about how this boy was doing on the many hills and mountains of the Camino. His parents both averred that he was doing great. They had just started the Camino, so he had only had one day of biking so far, but he had done wonderfully that first day. The boy himself seemed happy. He was proud of staying up with his parents and even boasted of being in the lead at times. Clearly, this was an adventure he was relishing. The other children we saw also seemed happy as they walked, skipped, and ran along. I overheard no whining or complaining. I became used to seeing all sorts. Even so, I was taken aback one day at what I saw. James and I were struggling down a steep, scree-covered slope. You had to really keep focused because the slippery rocks under your feet made every step treacherous. Walking sticks were a huge help, and I don't know how many times I would have fallen without. This, for me, was dangerous going. I had already broken my ankle once, years previously, and the last thing I wanted was another broken ankle or leg. If I fell and injured myself along this largely inaccessible trail, how would emergency workers even get to me, much less carry me out? I went extremely slowly, planting my walking sticks securely, carefully putting each foot down and testing the footing before fully shifting my weight onto that foot, and always being ready for the slides that inevitably happened despite my care. This was tiring and anxiety-producing hiking, so I stopped often to look around. I needed to remind myself of the beauty of the countryside and to remember the reasons why I was doing the walk. Thanks to my frequent stops, I had plenty of time to observe these two guys toiling up the slope towards us. Seeing them was unusual for two reasons. First, they were going in the wrong direction. That is, if they were headed away from, not towards, Santiago de Compostela. The great majority of pilgrims walk to Santiago. Only a tiny fraction walks home again or back to their starting point. In our 2 months of walking, we only saw a handful of pilgrims headed. The second reason the two men were worth observing was that they were pushing a baby carriage uphill on this scree-filled slope. It was hard enough going downhill. Going up, pushing that carriage must have been hell. I kept wondering about what sort of crazy guys would be bringing a baby on this trip. The only explanation I could think of was that maybe they were locals, not pilgrims, and had no choice about routes to get home. We approached closer and closer. Finally, we stopped, just uphill from them. The hood of the baby carriage was up, shielding the baby from the strong Spanish sun. Usually pilgrims pass each other by with a cheery "Buen Camino" exchanged. Occasionally a pilgrim will ask a question about the route ahead, how far to the next town, or whether the other pilgrim had seen a certain individual on the Camino. After I exchanged a few words with this particular pair, It was clear that these two men were foreign pilgrims, not locals. I continued to wonder about what in the world they were bringing a baby along on this trip for. While I wondered, I minded my manners and did not ask them any of the questions that were fizzing in my head. Where's the mom? How were they feeding the baby? Where were they staying? The pilgrim hostels wouldn't take babies, I was pretty sure. Finally, after a few minutes of chatting about the weather and the route, I broached the subject that I really wanted to know. Are you on your way home? Yes, one of the men replied. We are going back to our starting point in France. My God, I thought, over the Pyrenees with a baby carriage? Can I see the baby? Sure, take a look. I made my careful way down the slope, stopping by the carriage. I peeked in to see a mass of puppies curled up together. Only then did I notice a bitch sheltering in the shade under the baby carriage. Goodness, what's this? 7 puppies born on the Camino. How old are they? A week. I looked down at the mama dog under the carriage with pity. She'd had to walk to Santiago pregnant, whelp 7 pups, then turn around and go back the other direction while nursing her pups. I wondered, didn't ask, where they had acquired the baby carriage. And what about dog food for the new mom? I didn't see any in evidence. I looked at the mama dog again and wished I had the courage to tell the 2 guys that they should be giving her a ride in the carriage too. Instead, I just said a heartfelt buen camino y buena suerte and moved on down the slope. I'm still wondering if this pair of 10 all made it home. And I still wish that I had taken a photo of the pups in the baby carriage, the littlest pilgrims I saw.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. I am so excited you guys are joining me today. I have this fabulous guest, Miss Julie, with us. Hi, Madame. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I am excited to have you. Thank you. This is such a fun book. By the way, you are my first travel slash nonfiction author in this genre. So I'm super excited to have you. And I can't wait to get to know more about this book. So tell us, where did this book come from? What is this inspiration? How long did it take you to actually do El Camino? Tell us.
Well, I'll start by saying that I first learned about the Camino when I was 20 years old. I had dropped out of college and went to Portugal and taught English there, taught as a foreign language to Portuguese. And my roommate at the time was from New Zealand, and she handed me a book and said, well, you have to read this book. We were both readers. So it was Iberia by James Michener. Now, back in the 60s and 70s, James Michener was a huge best-selling author. He's kind of fallen out of favor since he stopped writing, since he died. But his books are long, usually very. So he wrote this book, Iberia, which concentrates on Spain, but also Portugal. And in chapter 13, it's all about the Camino de Santiago. Now, I come from a family where my mother had gone to Lourdes with my sister. We're very Catholic. And so I knew all about Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and so forth. But I had never heard of this Camino de Santiago. So I was fascinated to read about this pilgrimage route, which has been active since 822, basically. So for over 1,000 years, Christian pilgrims have gone along this Camino. And what they're heading for is the tomb of St. James the Apostle. He is buried in a town in northwest Spain called Santiago de Compostela. So by the time I read about the Camino in the early 1970s, there was almost no one taking the Camino. But by the time I finally got to do my Camino, 40 years later or so, it had had a huge boom in popularity. And that was spun by a lot of people. First of all, there was this priest who went all over Europe talking about the history of the Camino and painting yellow arrows all over trees and fences and posts all over Spain. And so, of course, you look at this yellow arrow and you think, what is that? So then you'd find out what the yellow arrows were. And of course, they're all pointing towards Santiago de Compostela. So the yellow arrow is now a symbol of this pilgrimage, along with the Camino shell, a scalloped shell. Anyway, so in 1970, I read about the Camino, but I had no way of doing it. It takes time and it takes money, and I had neither. I was living on the economy in Portugal. But I put it back in my brain that sometime I would like to do that. So fast forward to my retirement in 2014. And I said, the first long trip I want to do is this Camino trip. And in the interim, between when I first read about it and now, as I said, there was this huge upsurge of interest sparked by, let's say, Michener to start, but also by this priest who painted the yellow arrows. And then some famous people did the Camino, like Shirley MacLaine, and she wrote a book about it. But the real, I think, surge for Americans came after Martin Sheen and his son Emilio Estevez made the movie The Way, which was very popular and is still popular today. And people see that. And the story of The Way is that a father walks the Camino de Santiago after his son is killed trying to do the pilgrimage. So I knew about all this stuff. And in that intervening time, too, between when I first heard about the Camino, the culture of the Camino came, you have to walk it. You have to walk it. Jas Mister did not walk it. Believe me, he did not walk it. And I hadn't originally thought I would be walking it, but the culture is such that I thought, hey, I'm going to try to walk it. I did the Camino in 2016. I was planning to go alone, but in the end, my son came with me. So there were two of us. And we started in France and walked the 500 miles to Santiago de Compostela. Now, I say walked. We didn't walk the whole way, and I never planned to walk the whole way. My son got plantar fasciitis, like, I don't know, a third of the way through, so he couldn't walk anymore. And he would always take a bus or a taxi, and we would meet up at the end of the day. Most days I walked, but some days I would go with him in the bus or the taxi. So we did that 500-mile trip. And you asked how long it took. It took us 49 days to do the whole thing. We stayed in Spain another week so we could visit Madrid and Toledo. Pilgrimage itself took 49 days.
How did the writing of the book come about? When did you decide this is the story that I would like to tell people?
Wasn't after until I got home. When I retired, I wanted to go back to writing. I had written during my professional career, but it was professional writing. So I based at embassies as a press attaché many times. And I would write speeches for the ambassador or press releases or bulletins or whatever. And as cultural attaché, also I did a lot of writing. So I was always writing, wasn't creative writing. So I wanted to go back to creative writing. And I decided I wanted to try this new thing. Remember, this is 2015 or so, fairly old. So I wanted to try this new thing called a blog. So I said, okay, instead of doing what I normally do, which is a travel journal, just a handwritten travel journal, I'll start a blog. So I got a laptop, I got the blog stuff loaded, and I set off for Spain. Well, the first thing I found is that the wireless connection in these small Spanish towns is horrible. So I couldn't get links. I couldn't get the necessary to be able to upload photos, for example. So every day I found myself struggling, seemed far too long, 2 hours, 3 hours, just trying to upload a short blog piece. So I did it for about 3 weeks. And then I said, you know what? This is cutting in too much in my ability to enjoy the trip. So I went back to writing a longhand journal. So when I got home, I had about, I don't know, let's say 21 posts on my blog, and the rest was handwritten journal. So I first thought, well, I'd just transcribe all of these handwritten notes onto the blog. And then I'm thinking, but I have more to say than just day by day traveling. I have advice I'd like to give to other Camino goers. I'd like to talk more about special incidents that happened along the way, like the one I read, the Almond Man. I had other points of view, including my book includes a letter to the government of Spain about the Camino. So I thought, okay, well, I'm just turn this all into a book. Now, this was after I got back in 2016. I thought, oh, this will take me about let's say I'll give myself a year to write this book. Well, in August 2017, my house was one of those flooded in Houston by Hurricane Harvey. So that washed out everything. And I put the book aside and I took a whole year to get myself back in my house. That's how long it took. And then just things happened. So the start of 2019, my New Year's resolution, and I think this is the only New Year's resolution I've ever stuck with, was I am going to finish this book this year. So I did. I got in barely under the wire, December 2019, I published it. And I'm coming to realize that I'm not, besides an author, I'm now a publisher too. I like books that are not formulaic, if I can say this. I like books that are different in some aspect. So my own book, it's a hybrid book in that it's both a guidebook, suggestions on what you should do if you're planning to walk the Camino, but also a memoir. So it takes both of those genres. And at first, I had a lot of fears about the book before it came out. And one of them was I'd be criticized for not having a pure memoir or a pure guide. And I thought about it and I said, no, this is what I want to offer my readers. I want a blend of both. So I published it as is. And I was really surprised that I only had much later after it was printed, a couple of reviewers said, I would have preferred this in two books. Most people just loved it just the way it is. And so I also realized my book is really, its audience is for people planning to walk the Camino because it gives them suggestions and tells them what to expect. And for those who will never walk the Camino but want to know what the experience is like. So that's my target audience. And the book has done very well. It's won 5 awards.
That is awesome. I like the blend of genres. I like giving that complex look at this adventure for people who are planning or would like to know about it and not ever do it. So I think
Right.
that's such a beautiful thing. And you also tell them what to expect. So people, if they were looking for just a memoir or just a travel book, they had options from the beginning. So I applaud you for it. What else have you been working on after you published this book?
So my second book is also different from most books. It's actually on international adoption. And there aren't that many books on adoption. Well, let me just give a little backstory too. I adopted my son in 1992, and I was living overseas in Malaysia because my job required me to live overseas. And I was looking for a book on adoption that I could read to him. As an adopted parent, I adopted my son in Colombia in South America, and we were required to take a parenting class. Now, regular biological parents don't have to take a parenting class, but those of us who are adopted parents, we were required to take this class. So one of the points they made during the class was that your child should know he's adopted from the beginning. You shouldn't try to hide this or just not talk about it because they'll get to be a teenager and they'll find out from someone. And then they will be really angry because they'll feel like they were lied to or the truth was kept for them. So just tell your child from the beginning. So I wanted to do that with my son, and I wanted a book that I could read to him about adoption. So I called my mother back in the States and I said, could you go buy these books for me on adoption? And she came back and says, really not much, but she sent me what there was. So I realized from that point that there really wasn't the book that I needed for my son. Not only was he adopted, but he was an international adoption. So I actually wrote a little book for him and I read it to him from this time he was 2 years old until he was old enough I thought he really understood that he was adopted. And then I put it aside. So fast forward to the pandemic, I can't travel to do the next book I was planning. So I'm thinking, okay, what can I do? So I did a couple of things. I wrote short stories and submitted them to anthologies, but I also looked back and by now we have Amazon. So I did some research on Amazon and there's still no book on adoption like the one I was seeking. There are some, not many, on adoption, but they almost all focus on animal characters. So you'll have a mama bear will adopt a baby goose or something like that. And the second thing is they all focus on the adopted mother and the baby. That's all. I wanted something different. I wanted something focused on people. I wanted something through the complexity of the situation. The full title of my book is The Baby with Three Families, Two Countries, and One Promise, because it does involve multiple people, including usually three families. That is, biological parents, a foster family in the middle, and then the adopted family. These children also can claim and do claim two countries as their heritage. So anyway, I wrote a book that looked at international adoption, but using people and talking about the whole experience, bringing in family and friends, grandparents, and even the family dog.
I love it. That is such a powerful message. And now that you mention it, there's not a lot of books that actually address that. I love the fact that you said tell them from the beginning so they don't resent people. That is such a powerful message.
Yeah, the other thing about adoption books is the ones that are, most of them are for the adults. So again, it's a very niche market, if I can say that. It's a children's book. It's for international adoption. And it covers the whole range of the adoption experience. I wrote the book thinking, again, pre-reading, so let's say 2 to 6 years old. But one of my reviewers read the book with her grandson, who's 9, And the reason she did it with her grandson was he had a friend, wasn't his family, but a friend who had been adopted. He didn't really understand what adoption was. So they read the book together, the reviewer and the grandson. And she reported in a review that he asked lots and lots of questions. So it was helpful for even a 9-year-old to try to figure out what adoption is.
Especially when they know somebody that has been adopted. They hear these words, they're like, what does that mean? So that's such a powerful tool for parents, grandparents, anybody to read to a child who has friends or themselves experiencing.
Right. Beyond
Yes.
that, my second Camino book is going to be one about riding, horseback riding, the Camino. I'm a rider. I've always been a rider. I love riding. I love horses. As soon as they lifted the restrictions on traveling to Spain, I went in September and did a horseback Camino. So that's going to be my next book. But I've been sidetracked again. I always get sidetracked because I'm also a publisher. So I've been working on this new book I'm getting ready to publish.
How do you make the transition from being your writer to now you're like, I'm going to start publishing? What actually motivated you to do that?
Well, when I came back and retired and started my writing career, I went to a lot of seminars and courses and so forth, including on publishing. And it turns out that, again, in the intervening years from when I went to my master's degree program in creative writing, everything has changed in the publishing world, just like everything has changed in the newspaper world. I also studied journalism. And when I started exploring, and I thought, okay, well, all the advice I get says you can expect a 3-year wait before the time you finish your book, and then you find an agent. The agent finds some publisher, you hope, that will publish it. And then goes through all the copy editing, et cetera, and gets published. So I, I don't have 3 years to wait. I really don't. And in the meantime, I heard about this new trend, which is independent publishing or self-publishing, depending. So I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to wait 3 years. So I learned everything I could about indie publishing, and it's a lot to learn. I know you know this, DC, because you're in this realm too. It's a lot to learn. So then I'm thinking, boy, if I'm learning all this for myself, I might as well make my knowledge available to other authors who maybe don't have the time to invest in all this research. So I said, okay, I'm going to be a publisher too. And I opened myself up for publishing. The pitch was that all of this, deciding to be a publisher, happened when I had my book almost ready for publication in 2019. So I actually opened my little publishing business, and we went into business right before the COVID hit. So everything shut down. It's just everything. And so all the plans I had to go out and do marketing, publicity for my books, but also as a publisher, I had to cancel, shut down. Didn't happen. So it's just now that I'm finally getting back again to going out in-person events and being able to market my services as a publisher.
I love the fact that you're realizing there is a need for other people to actually get this information without themselves having to spend years upon years trying to do the research. So I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited you took on this entire mission. So tell me, Madame, where can our listeners find you? Where they can learn more about you and the books? Tell us about it.
I have 2 websites. One is my publishing website, so BayouCityPress.com. Houston is nicknamed the Bayou City, so BayouCityPress.com. And I also have my author website, which is Julie Connor, Connor, author.com. So JulieConnorAuthor.com.
Madame, I could talk to you forever. I'm so excited about your projects. Congratulations on the second book that you have coming out. So are you ready for the lightning round before you go?
Okay.
Easy peasy. Don't think too hard on it. Let's see. First one, Pepsi or Coke?
Coke.
Nice. City or country?
Both.
Okay. I like early bird or night owl?
Night owl by desire, early bird because of 33 years of working.
Android or Apple devices?
Apple, I guess. I have both. Any answer for me is both, both.
I see this. This might be a little tricky. Let's see how you do with this one. We need one word that best describes you.
Traveler.
Ooh, that is perfect. Madam, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
DC, I have so enjoyed meeting you, and we're both met at the Texas Library Association conference. And I'm continuing working with TLA, and I hope you will too. And I really want to thank you and your listeners for sharing your time with me. I appreciate it.
Madam, it is such a pleasure. It was so much fun meeting you. Many, many blessings to our listeners. Go ahead, follow Miss Julie. Check out these amazing travel books. They'll give you an insight that you never expected. So, everyone, have an amazing day. Bye.
Bye.